Hi, this is Pastor Allen. It's Thursday, August 6th, and this is our daily Bible study in the afternoon as I had some things to do this morning. But we're looking at Matthew's Gospel, chapter 18, verses 21 through 35. And this is the parable of the unmerciful or unforgiving servant. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother and sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times?" Jesus answered, "I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times." So now after forgiveness, after church discipline, after treating children right, now we are at forgiveness. And Peter asked Jesus this question, how many times should I forgive? And the standard was just a little bit under 7. And that was considered good. In other words, if you did it the first time, you were forgiven. If you did it the second time, third time, fourth time, 5th time, you were forgiven. And then there was no more forgiveness available, or the religious leaders said you didn't have to forgive anymore. Well, Jesus has a different take on that. He says 77 times. He basically gave an impossible number. Why is that good? Because we make mistakes. We have to forgive others, and we need forgiveness from others. And so with such a high number of opportunities for forgiveness, we are showing and experiencing God's love and God's mercy. And that's a great thing. Now, it's not always easy, but we have to always err on the side of forgiveness, especially if we're asking God for forgiveness and if we've received God's forgiveness. You know, we wouldn't want God to use a lower standard with us, so we in turn shouldn't be using a lower standard with others that need forgiveness. And then Jesus goes on to tell the parable of the unmerciful servant. Verse 23, "Therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt." Okay, so here's this man. He owes money, doesn't have the money to repay the debt. 10,000 bags of gold. That's a lot of money. And so the guy says, okay, throw him, his wife, his children in prison. Of course, there's virtually no way he can pay if he's in prison, and then take everything he owns and sell it to pay for the debt. Verse 28, "At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. 'Be patient with me,' he begged, 'and I will pay back everything.' The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go." So the debt is completely wiped out. He's been forgiven. He's received mercy. And Jesus tells this as an example of the mercy and forgiveness that we receive from God. Verse 28, "But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. 'Pay back what you owe me,' he demanded. Not only did he grab the guy, he's choking him. I mean, not a pleasant experience. It doesn't sound like this guy was a nice guy either. It's like, pay me back what you owe me. And then verse 29, but his fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, be patient with me and I will pay it back. That's the same thing this guy had just done with his master. You know, he was about to be thrown into prison. He's about to be punished. Everything he owned was to be sold, and he did the same thing, and the master forgave him. So here is his fellow servant, probably a friend of his, who's doing the same thing. Verse 30 says, but he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown in prison until he could pay his debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. Now, if the guy still had the debt hanging over his head of the 10,000 bags of gold, yeah, you could maybe understand a little bit why he would do something like this. But his debt was completely wiped out. It was gone. It was done. He didn't have to worry about it. This was almost an element of greed. He had what he had been given, and plus he wanted more. Verse 32, then the master called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. No other reason other than he begged him, and the master had mercy on him. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. Quite a parable, quite a lesson for us. You know, we often forget how much God has forgiven us and what it cost him. It cost him his son's life as a sacrifice. And we forget that. And when we forget that, we lose our focus and we do things that are not mercy, things that are not forgivable, things that are not right. And that's what happened here. But again, the master made it right the first time for the servant. He forgave him, and the servant blew it. And then he goes out and chokes this other servant and tries to get money, and the other servants are appalled at this. And they went and told him what happened, and the master was not happy about this. So we need to remember the price that has been paid for us on our behalf. And like Jesus told Peter, we need to forgive 70 times 7. We need to forgive virtually forever, all the time. And then verse 35, this is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. And so that's the whole point about this, forgiveness. We need to forgive each other just as God has forgiven us. And if we refuse to forgive, if we're stubborn about forgiveness, if we try to take it out on someone else, God's standard is, look, I've forgiven you. I've shown you mercy. This is how you are to act. But if you're unable to act, then I have a solution for that also. And that's punishment until the debt of yours can be paid. And unfortunately, the debt that we owe God, that we owe Jesus, we can never, ever repay. So it's better to follow his example and forgive. and forgive as many times as we need to forgive. Have a great day.